AI is getting better at work, not just faster better. It writes codes, designs, and analyzes with less effort than most humans. So here's the question. We don't ask often enough. If machines can do the work better than us, what's left worth doing? For a long time, the answer was simple. You worked, you contributed. That's how you proved your value. But now the system is sending mixed signals. It rewards efficiency, even when efficiency no longer needs people. So we're stuck with a strange tension. We still measure human worth through productivity in a world where productivity is increasingly optional. And that leaves us with one unresolved question, not about jobs or technology, but about what actually deserves our time. For a long time, we were told the same story. New technology kills jobs, then it creates better ones. That story made sense when machines replaced muscles, or when software replaced paperwork. AI is different, not because it's smarter, but because once it's built, it doesn't scale like human labour. A person's output grows slowly. Training experience, coordination, all take time. An AI system doesn't work that way. Once the model exists, its output multiplies instantly. One more task, one more user, one more decision. The cost of doing more keeps falling towards zero. That changes the math. AI doesn't replace one task at a time. It compresses entire roles into tools. A junior developer with AI can now do what used to take a small team. A single creator can produce what once required a studio. And the bar keeps moving up. Not because people are lazy or unprepared, not because they failed to adapt, but because the system no longer waits for humans to catch up. In previous tech revolutions, productivity gains needed more people somewhere else. Factories needed managers. Computers needed operators. AI doesn't. It scales without asking for permission. It doesn't need onboarding. And it doesn't slow down when the labour market does. So the old promise quietly breaks. Not because technology failed, but because it finally succeeded. Here's the uncomfortable shift. The economy doesn't need more workers. It needs fewer, better ones. And even that is temporary. Which means the problem isn't that jobs are disappearing, it's that work is losing its role as the main bridge between humans and value. And once that bridge weakens, everything built on top of it starts to wobble. At this point, it's tempting to say the problem is unemployment. It isn't. Jobs are disappearing in some places, but economic value isn't. In fact, overall output keeps rising. The real question is simple and uncomfortable. Where is that value going? In previous economies, value followed labour. If you worked the land, you shared in the harvest. If you worked in a factory, wages and output were tied together. Ownership wasn't equal, but participation was structurally linked to production. AI breaks that link. The value now concentrates upstream in the models that automate judgment, the data that trains them, and the infrastructure that runs continuously without fatigue. Right now, it flows in a very predictable direction to whoever owns the models, the data, and the servers. Everyone else gets access, not ownership, and access doesn't compound. Using the system creates output, but ownership determines who benefits when that output scales. When systems grow more productive, without more workers' returns, no longer flow through wages, they flow through control. You can use the system, you can depend on it, but you don't build equity by participating in it. That's why conversations keep circling back to universal basic income. UBI sounds reasonable. It keeps people afloat, it prevents collapse. But structurally, it does one very specific thing. It decouples survival from ownership without changing who controls the system. Income keeps you alive. Ownership gives you a stake in the upside. That's the difference most debates skip. If AI is the new engine of wealth, then wages stop being the core issue. The issue becomes value allocation, not employment. Do people share in the returns of systems that function with minimal labour, or do they remain permanent users of infrastructure they don't control because economies don't fracture when productivity rises? They fracture when value creation and value capture split. Once value disconnects from labour and ownership stays narrow, the system doesn't just become unequal, it becomes structurally unstable. This is where things start to feel personal. Not because the economy changes, but because the story people used to tell about themselves no longer works. For a long time, work wasn't just how you earned money. It was how you explained who you were. It answered simple questions. Were you useful? Were you trying? Did you belong? Overtime effort became identity. AI doesn't argue with that idea. It just makes it harder to believe. When machines can write code and design with less friction, productivity stops feeling like a reflection of you. Trying harder doesn't restore pride. It only highlights how little control you have over the outcome. So the discomfort people feel isn't only about income or security. It's about recognition. People are still told to improve themselves to stay competitive, to keep proving their value. But the feedback loop is breaking. Effort no longer guarantees relevance. Skill no longer guarantees recognition. And that creates a quiet question. Most people don't say out loud, if what I do no longer explains who I am, what does? What's unsettling is that the answers don't come from performance. They come from things that are harder to measure. Showing up without a scoreboard. Caring when there's no reward. Choosing to matter to someone even when it doesn't count as output. These moments don't scale, they don't optimize, they don't fit into rankings. But they're where identity actually forms. AI didn't take that away. It forced us to notice that work was never meant to carry that weight alone. What happens next isn't decided by AI itself. It's decided by how societies respond once the old rules stop working. One outcome is quiet and gradual. Productivity keeps climbing. Fewer people are needed. Ownership stays concentrated. Life doesn't fall apart, it just narrows. People are supported, but mostly as spectators. In that future, systems keep functioning. Efficiency improves, crises are managed, but participation fades. People don't shape outcomes, they adapt to them. Decisions arrive already optimized elsewhere. Trade-offs are made upstream. The economy becomes something that happens around them, not something they help steer. Income replaces involvement. Security replaces influence. Nothing collapses, but nothing really advances either. The system keeps running while fewer people feel like they have a say in where it's going. That's one future. The danger of that future isn't collapse, it's quiet disengagement. A society that works while fewer people recognize themselves in it. The other future begins with a harder admission. If labour is no longer the main source of value, then work can't remain the main condition for participation. That forces a redesign, not of technology, but of the rules around access, voice, and responsibility. In this future, survival isn't tied to proving usefulness every day. Education stops pretending the solution is endless reskilling. Contribution is no longer measured only by output. Instead, societies have to decide who gets to shape outcomes when machines handle execution. Who sets priorities? Who takes responsibility when efficiency isn't the goal? Who is accountable for choices that affect everyone? This path isn't smooth or guaranteed. It involves conflict redesign and trade-offs, but it treats people as participants in the future, not as excess capacity left behind by progress. The difference between these futures isn't optimism or pessimism. It's whether societies let outdated rules persist by default or deliberately choose new ones once work is no longer the center of everything. If machines can handle the work, then work can't be the answer anymore. For a long time, survival decided meaning. You worked so you could live. You lived so you could keep working. That loop made sense when effort and output were tied together, but once productivity no longer needs us, that logic collapses. So the real question isn't economic, it's human. If efficiency isn't the goal, what is not optimization? Not growth for its own sake, not staying busy just to feel legitimate. What's left worth doing are the things that don't win in a spreadsheet. Taking responsibility when there's no clear incentive. Making judgments when the data points in opposite directions. Caring about people who slow things down. Choosing what matters even when it doesn't scale. AI can generate answers. It can't decide which questions are worth asking. It can optimize outcomes. It can't tell us which outcomes are worth living with. That part was never about intelligence. It was about values. And values don't come from productivity. They come from choice. So if AI does the work, that doesn't make humans obsolete. It removes the excuse that we're here just to produce, the excuse that meaning has to be earned through output, the excuse that worth needs to be justified by efficiency. What's left worth doing is deciding deliberately what kind of society we actually want to build now that survival no longer explains everything. That decision can't be automated, and for the first time in a long while it's finally unavoidable.